What's up, you guys? So, I was specifically asked to talk about the situation with Eva Longoria being accused of downplaying the role of African American women in this election, the 2020 election, where Black women have did their thing. I posted on my blog and here on YouTube about Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams registered almost 1 million voters after she lost her election due to voter fraud. Like she said, she took Sheba for about 10 days and then she started plotting, and she registered 800,000 voters. And the majority of those voters, of course, voted Democratic, and it turned Georgia into a flip state. Now, politically, that's a big deal. If you're familiar with the Electoral College, you know that being a flip state it means you're a big deal. Your state is a big deal. So before we get into Eva Longoria, I just want to say hats off to Stacey Abrams and everyone who worked with her to register almost 1 million voters in Georgia. And for those of you who are residents of Georgia, I do want to encourage you to vote in the Georgia Senate runoff. Now let's get into the situation with Miss Eva Longoria. Eva Longoria has been accused of downplaying the role of African American women, specifically in the 2020 election results. In an interview with MSNBC, when she was asked about women of color, she said that, quote, Latina women are the real heroines here. And so she is definitely facing backlash for that quote. But before we get into this, I want to just play for you the video of what she said.
If everyone got that on Tuesday night at 9 p.m., what you just walked us through, the huge margins I walked through in the last segment, the power of young voters, in particular a diverse coalition, and really people of color, but specifically women of color, putting Joe Biden over the top and what that means. If that all just exploded along with, a clear electoral vote margin a Tuesday night, that might have sunk in. Instead, we had a lot of other stuff between then and now that doesn't really matter. And so I wonder what you think about that, because going forward, this is also about power. And does the Democratic Party understand why it's back in power?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, I think, campaign financing needs to be looked at. I think the way in which we campaigned, there were so many false ads in Florida in Spanish. Spanish wasn't regulated the same as in English. And so I do think we need to take a look at that. Again, our work is just beginning. But I want to talk about what you just said about the women. The women of color showed up in big ways. Of course, you saw in Georgia what Black women have done, but Latina women were the real heroines here, beating men in turnout in every state and voting for Biden Harris at an average rate close to 3-1. And that wasn't surprising to us. Latinos are the CEOs of the households. They make all the financial decisions and healthcare decisions and educational decisions. Many Latinas are small business owners, and they wanted a plan for recovery for themselves, not for Wall Street. And so Trump's policies were never aimed at the struggling Latina community. And, if you look at voter suppression on top of that, how Latinas showed up, even through the closing of polling places and the shutting down of drop-off sites, the new voter ID laws and long lines and driving 30 miles and all of that. And on top of that, restrictions and safety protocols of a pandemic. That spirit and perseverance that Latinas use in their daily lives, the struggle to pay their bills and the struggle to show up to their jobs and homeschool their kids and take care of their elders, that's the same perseverance and spirit they use to show up at polls.
Number one, I know she's talking about Black women almost like versus Latina women. And I just want to first say that Black women and Latina women, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, there are Black women who are Latina, first of all. So they're not necessarily two completely separate entities. We all know that Latina and Hispanic, those terms refer to ethnicities and not races. So let me just get into the backlash, and then I'm going to tell you guys my opinion. One person said that Eva Longoria MSNBC interview is why we emphasize that you specifically say Black women and not women of color. Come on, because even within our communities, our work is diminished and erased. So let's talk about this for a minute, because the term women of color, it's meant to be inclusive, right? It's supposed to include women from diverse, quote unquote, diverse racial backgrounds like African American or just Black in general. Hispanic women, Asian women, Native American women, Pacific Islander women. It's supposed to include anything but white, basically. That's what the term women of color means. And so personally, while I understand why people use that term, I do feel like using that term women of color, separating white people from people who are quote unquote persons of color, in a way, it supports the ideology that white is pure. And that's an ideology I don't believe in. I specifically don't believe in the one drop rule. I don't believe in the purity of the white race. That's my personal opinion. So when you start talking about white people and then people of color, when you separate them like that and group anything that's non-white together, I feel like you're upholding white supremacy in this ideology of white purity. And I'm not with that. So I definitely understand what this person is saying. And then Kamala's pantsuit, okay? Come on, pantsuit. Kamala's pantsuit said, Eva Longoria trying to dismiss and diminish the major accomplishments of Black women needs to be called out hard, okay? And I do feel like this is something that needs to be talked about. I'm not surprised by what she said. I'm appalled by it. But I'm not surprised by it because I feel like people engage in identity politics. And when you group people together, like when you group people who feel like they've been ignored, when you put them all in one group, they're still going to fight to be heard. Black women feel like they've been ignored and overlooked. Latina women feel like they've been ignored and overlooked. Asian women feel like they've been ignored and overlooked. Native American women, I mean, come on now. When you put groups of people who feel like they've been ignored, when you lump them together under one category like women of color, of course, there's going to be a fight to be heard because they all feel like they've been ignored. That is my opinion of what is going on here. I'm not surprised by Eva's comments. And I do also want to get into what she said to clarify her comments. She said, about my MSNBC interview, Black women have long been the backbone of the Democratic Party, something we have seen played out in this election as well as previous ones. Black women absolutely should be applauded and lifted up. They brought this victory home in a big way. I was comparing Latinas to Latino men, not Black women. I meant Latinas were the one who showed up for our Latinx community. Finally, Black women don't have to do it alone. Latina women and other groups of color and other women of color are standing with them and growing their voice and power. Together, we are unstoppable. Black women turned out 90% for Biden. I, as a Latina, aspire to be as engaged and as effective as they are. And then she also wrote this clarifying even more. She said, I'm so sorry and sad to hear that my comments on MSNBC could be perceived as taking credit from Black women. When I said that Latinas were heroines in this election, I simply meant that they turned out in greater numbers and voted more progressively than Latino men. My wording was not clear and I deeply regret that. There is such a history in our community of anti-Blackness in our community, and I would never want to contribute to that. So let me be very clear. Now, the anti-Blackness, like I said, it did sound like she was comparing Black women and Latina women. And like I said at the start of this video, there is a crossover because there are Black women who are also Latina. So when she talks about the anti-Blackness, I think she's talking about the anti-Blackness, not only in America in general, but specifically in the Hispanic community. She goes on to say, Black women have long been the backbone of the Democratic Party, something we have seen played out in this election as well as previous ones. Finally, Black women don't have to do it alone any longer. Latinas, many who identify as Afro-Latina, Indigenous women, AAPI women, and other women of color are standing with them so we can grow our collective voice and power. Together, we are unstoppable. Nothing but love and support for Black women everywhere. You deserve a standing ovation. What y'all think about that? I feel like she's being honest. Like I said, if you listen to the whole quote, he asked her about women of color. And of course, she started talking about Latina women because she is Latina.
But I want to talk about what you just said about the women. The women of color showed up in big ways. Of course, you saw in Georgia what Black women have done, but the Latina women were the real heroines here, beating men in turnout in every state and voting for.
So you hear she's saying that Latina women beat men in turnout in every state. So we assume she's saying Latina women beat Latino men in turnout in every state. But again, because of the fact that he asked her about women of color, And because she was talking about women of color and talking about Black women, and then went into Latina women being the real heroines, I can see why she's getting the backlash that she's getting, because her message is not clear. But leave a comment and let me know what you think. All right, you guys, I wanted to give you a quick little demo of how I use my graphic packs, my self-care wallpapers. You can use them as wallpapers or as your lock screen. And they serve as reminders to take care of yourself, that self-care isn't selfish. For me, my favorite one right now is this reminder to take a break, because I'm always so busy, especially as a mom. Y'all know my kid is young, and so I'm always so busy, and this is just like a reminder that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to care for myself. So you can get your set right below this video. You'll see the link. As always, thanks for watching.